Doug Parker is a lawyer. He practiced law in New York and Washington, D.C. area for a number of years. Was a part of the government of President Nixon and Ford. After retiring, he retired to Cape Cod, where he had a home there for a number of years, but has now relocated to Ojai and joined our club. We're certainly happy about that. But as I said, he was a lawyer. He maintained his interest in the law and has been lecturing and writing about the Supreme Court. And today he's going to talk to us a little bit about the importance of Justice Kennedy on the Supreme Court and how this justice may affect all of us in the maybe not too distant future. Doug?
I'd like to make one other introduction. My daughter Heather made a surprise visit coming up to do a videotape of this event, and I promise that if there are any royalties from that video, I will dedicate them to the men's club. Justice Kennedy occupies a pivotal position on the Supreme Court, and because of that, for many years he has been the object of considerable attention. And that is true right now and in recent times. Some of you may recall a year ago in the State of the Union message, President Obama had some sharp remarks about a decision of the Supreme Court in Citizens United, a decision that had to do with corporate expenditures for political purposes. Justice Kennedy was the author of the opinion for the court in that case, a 5-2 decision. Since that time, and in more recent months, there's been a good deal of attention given to Kennedy as potentially being the deciding vote in two groups of rather controversial cases that are believed to be making their way to the Supreme Court. One involving same-sex marriage, and the other involving the health care, Obamacare legislation that was passed, and in particular the individual mandate provisions under that law. So we've heard a good deal about Justice Kennedy, and we are apt to hear a good deal more in the coming months and years. This afternoon, in the brief time I have, I want to talk quickly about Kennedy's record as a swing voter, touch on some past criticisms that have been made of Kennedy, and then talk briefly about the prospects for these cases that I mentioned involving gay rights and health care. As quick background that many of you probably are quite familiar with, Kennedy is a native Californian. He was born and raised in Sacramento, went on to practice law in Sacramento after attending Stanford University and Harvard Law School. Then in 1975, he was appointed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals for California, by President Ford at the recommendation of Governor Reagan at the time. And then in 1988, he was appointed to the Supreme Court by President Reagan, this coming after the failed nomination of Judge Robert Ford, some of you may recall. Now, what does it mean to say that Kennedy is a swing voter? Well, to understand that, you have to realize the extent to which the court is polarized, as is often said. that is divided between liberals and conservatives. And if you want to look at the picture that was a part of the handout, just to refresh your recollection, the conservatives on the court are Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Scalia, Kennedy, Thomas, and Alito. And the liberals are Justices Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan. Now, the latter two, Sotomayor and Kagan, having replaced Justices Stevens and Souter within the last couple of years. Now, with that definition or breakdown of liberals and conservatives, it is important to recognize that is sometimes overemphasized. And I say that because the great majority of decisions by the Supreme Court do not break neatly down liberal and conservative lines. There are, for example, just to take some statistics from the 2009-2010 term, the court issued 86 opinions that year. Of those, 16 decisions were decided 5-4. Of those 16, there were 11 that were decided along liberal and conservative lines, and 5 with a more mixed representation. Now, Kennedy is regarded as a swing voter because he most frequently joins with the other conservatives on the court, but he has voted with liberals on a number of high-profile cases. As a conservative, for example, Kennedy in the 2009-2010 term voted with Chief Justice Roberts 79% of the time, as compared with Justice Stevens, the more liberal member, most liberal member of the court at the time, only 59% of the time. In the 5-4 decisions that were divided along liberal and conservative lines, Kennedy voted with the conservatives 8 times and with the liberals 3 times. So that puts it in a little bit of perspective. Now, one of the cases that in the past have upset conservatives with Kennedy, and there have been several of those. This began really in 1992 when Kennedy had been on the court for 4 years. Pardon me. There were 2 cases that came down that year, one involving school prayer. Justice Kennedy joined the liberals in the court in holding unconstitutional a practice of having a non-denominational invocation and benediction at high school graduation ceremonies. And this was determined by a majority of the court to be in violation of the First Amendment prohibition of the establishment of a church. That case occasioned some controversy, but it was quickly overcome with even greater controversy by a case called Planned Parenthood against Casey, which dealt with the thorny issue of abortion, which had been percolating through the courts and up to the Supreme Court and back down for many years since 1973 when Roe against Wade had been decided. And it had been thought by many that the court now had a conservative majority that would overrule Roe against Wade. That did not happen. Kennedy joined with Justices O'Connor and Souter in writing a joint opinion that modified Roe against Wade to a significant extent, but upheld the fundamental right to an abortion. And that became the holding of the court, and that's been that has remained the law ever since. And that was very disappointing to conservatives, and who seem to hold it more against Kennedy than they did against Justice O'Connor, for reasons Roman Catholic, and they felt that as a Catholic, it was more certain that he would take a firm position against abortion. Two other cases that occasioned upset or criticism of our conservatives were cases involving gay rights, and I'll mention those in a little more detail in a minute. Then there were a couple of death penalty cases in which, one of which Kennedy joined liberals in holding that the death penalty could not be applied to persons who were under 18 years of age at the time the crime was committed. And another more recent case in which he held, again, I'm writing for the majority, that the death penalty could not be imposed in a case of child rape that did not involve a killing, a fatality. And finally, the other case that caused him a great deal of criticism from the right was his decision in the Boumediene case dealing with Guantanamo, in which he held that the right of habeas corpus was available to prisoners at Guantanamo, that it was, although not in some technical sense a part of U.S. territory, that it was for all practical purposes, and that therefore habeas corpus